Winter, spring, summer, fall, seasons change, we still keep it together.
Hey Beverly Hills 90210 fans, are you ready to dive deep, episode by episode, storyline by storyline, character by character, as we break down the making of your favorite zip code, with your hosts, Charles Rosin.
Did I say that?
Mary
This
Mullins.
heinous thing about the real person, and we're going, what? We're getting rid of this guy.
Pete Ferrero.
I'm feeling wonderful. Kathleen looks TV crush-worthy.
Like so many special guests. And all your questions. Live on the Beverly Hills 90210 show. Oh, yeah.
Here we are again on the Beverly Hills 90210 show. This is going to be a really fun episode. We're talking about Commencement. It's such a big episode for 90210 fans. Big transition. There's a lot to talk about in so many different ways. I want to say hi to Dan Attias, who's back with us again. Awesome episode. You were just telling us you're coming back from New York, shooting some Billion stuff. How was it? How's New York these days?
New York is coming back. It was very encouraging. You know, it's it feels like life is kind of the spring is happening, which is really nice. The park is beautiful. People are out at the park. Didn't have to wear masks in the park, so it was great. It was great.
Awesome.
Did you shoot one episode or two, Dan?
Two. The last two of the fifth season. Which,
beautiful! Congratulations!
I cannot wait to watch those ones.
Yeah, it's gonna be great.
Yeah.
Big fan.
And Karen Rosin, how are you? It's good to see you again.
I'm very good. Nice to see you. Thanks.
Yeah, really nice writing on all this. And Chuck, of course, how are those Dodgers doing these days? We love to start with baseball.
Well, that's a long season.
That's what I say.
A long season.
That's what I
Get
say.
back to me in September.
And Melanie, you're with us. How's all going with you? Class of 98.
Yeah, things are good. I'm happy to be here today. I haven't seen this episode in forever, so it'll be fun to talk about it. And let's kick it off. Let's do it.
That's right. All right. So Chuck and Karen, let's talk about this episode. There's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of great clips, and I'm talking about clips from the show that you guys spread out through to show kind of like a best of the things that have happened in the last 3 seasons. You're going to transition into season 4. What was the process like for you writing the 2-part episode on Hulu? I don't know if it aired as one or if it was 2 weeks in a row. I don't know that information.
Oh no! It was a 2-hour special.
Mm-hmm.
It was, our ratings were so good for the episode that we actually made the front page of Variety the next day.
Wow.
And it was always intended to be this. The one thing that most remember about, many things I remember about this particular episode, but one of them that you wouldn't know if you see it, is that the moment that my end credit came on, or excuse me, my end credit, not even the last one, my end credit to end the episode, there was immediately one of the stars, I can't remember which one, did a short little blurb for Fox promising that the show was not ending, that we were coming back, that it was going to college, because this was Mr. Spelling's major concern during this.
I'm going to just cut you off, Chuck. I'm going to cut you off for 1 second because we have a very special guest joining us.
Oh, please. Yay.
Hi.
Madam President. Hello, Gabrielle.
Guys, how you doing?
Hey, how
Dan
are you?
Attias. Oh my God.
Yeah, good to see you.
How are you?
We were just getting into this, Gabrielle, talking about Commencement. We talked beforehand, and you were telling me this is one of your favorite episodes. Yeah,
It is. It's one of my. I had to ask them to make that. I could be the valedictorian. I'm changing my glasses. Yes, I love doing it. I was really proud to be able to do it, and they can remember much more of it than I can.
Well, you may have asked us to be a valedictorian, but it was already in the book that you were the valedictorian, and we just have all watched it again, and just the way that that in that particular, that last scene when you recover and you just start speaking and you remember it and you really bring up the hope and optimism of a graduation of a generation. And I think the words that were there that mostly come from Karen, were really, I think makes the episode. I think otherwise it would be a little bit just, there's a clip and here's a clip and here's a clip. It really is the culmination. And you were so funny. And I know people don't think of you, especially now, as someone who does comedy, but yes, you do.
My whole life is a comic act. It's okay. I can't believe I'm seeing, well, it's so good to see everybody. I did love that show. I know that's what you're talking about, but I can't help that I'm seeing Dan Attias, who I just haven't seen for so long.
Yeah.
How are you?
Very bad director.
Diana wanted me to mention that, not mention, she reminded me that maybe one of the last times we saw each other, I think we had dinner at your house. It was it was probably just after the show, and that was so many years ago, but it was really a wonderful experience. And I so loved watching you in this episode. You really, Chuck mentioned the speech. I really was a tearjerker to me listening to that. It was it kind of brought together. I mean, that's kind of the thing about this episode that I think was so great, is it really just embodied the heart of the whole appeal of this show. It's like friendship and
it was all about friendship, relationships,
and being there for each other, and I think that's probably what so many people responded to, is they wish they had friends like that, or maybe they do, but I mean, just the meaning of things is really in the relationships with other close friends.
And that you can go through all the hard times, but in the end you have each other. And I think in society right now, we need that more than ever. Air it now and everybody will gravitate, because people are longing to be able to reconnect.
Air it, but we understand they don't air it on Hulu because of some of the clearances that were embedded. Some of the music is embedded in the show, and they didn't change that music because they couldn't, and so they don't air it on Hulu right now. It's like a collector's item, practically.
Which is one of the reasons, Gabrielle and Dan, now we're doing shows with very few exceptions that you can't see on Hulu.
Right.
Because there are a lot of them. And they're usually anyone that has live performance. So some of the stuff that we had in the senior breakfast when they sing the parody to the theme for Dobie Gillis, to Brandon, loves a good, that wipes it out. So no one can see it. And it's part of the problem. I want to announce, though, since we're talking about it, and Gabrielle, it's a political issue, so I think you'll be interested in it. I'm actually writing a letter right now to Congressman Ted Lieu, who's asked me to write the letter, to see if we can get at least a percentage of our episodes and others who have had their music stripped for whatever reason in the Library of Congress. Because the leadership of the television industry is not going to step up on this. This is not the film business. This isn't the music business. And they have great music they preserve and great movies they preserve. Television, they haven't gotten into yet. Clearly,
in other words, in the Library of Congress with the original score.
With the original things that people can see it if they want and have it.
I think Ted Lieu would be very supportive of that. I can't imagine him being
I hope so. We'll see. He's my congressman, so we'll see what happens.
Anyway, we're trying to get that. It's a good point.
It's a kind of funny irony about the idea, the subject of music rights on this episode is, when I was editing the show after shooting it and from the script originally, there was always indicated a wonderful song to end the episode. It was the Eagles song. And I forget what it was.
The end of the Innocence. The third stanza.
And we cut it, and it was so beautiful. I mean, the song that's in now is lovely, and it works well. But the end of the Innocence was so perfect, and it was painful, but we couldn't air it because the licensing fee was going to be enormous.
Right.
And so it had to be, subsidized.
Well, that's not actually the reason, Dan. It wasn't the licensing fee. I'll tell you, the reason was it was theoretically an apology because Irving Azoff was the man who managed the Eagles, and he also was the man who released our soundtrack album. So we went to him to go to Don Henley, and it's a very personal song for Don Henley, as you can imagine. Sure. And Don Henley, who ironically has been a long time represented by Lindsay's father-in-law, has just said no, and and with apologies, and we would get that sometimes. So I give him a pass on that because I love Don Henley and I love the song. But anybody listening, go to the third stanza, line it up.
Our editor friend Todd has done this, and it is. And after I've seen it, it's impossible to see it differently.
Undo it, right?
Yeah, like now that I've seen that version that you guys intended, it's hard to go back to what the other version sounds like, fake music, even though it's a real song.
Are you willing to show it on this, or do you want to save it for?
I will, but I'll edit it in later. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Gabrielle, I wanted to ask you. What you guys were talking about before about reading the speech and all that. Watching this in New Jersey when I was younger, I mean, like you guys kind of talked about, it was the end of the innocence. It was the end of our high school. A young Gabrielle Carteris, does she understand that as an actor, that this is going to be speaking to high school students and people all over the place, or is she just in the? Because it's so powerful now. We're looking back at it all these years later, but. Where are you at that time in your life when you're doing that speech?
So I really do remember that time because I really did want to do that speech. And you were actually thinking of having Jason do it. You're saying it's between you and Jason. We're not sure. I said, it should be Andrea. She fought so hard. Why would you just and I remember, and then you said, you're right, we're going to do it. And I think that it was,
Good decision on Charles's part.
But I think it was really, for me, it was a real state. I didn't think about for all the kids who are watching. I actually felt it was a statement to our relationship together. And I think that it was, for me, it was a very emotional kind of, we've arrived through a really long journey together. It really did feel like a graduation. It really did feel like that's what it was. And it was a very celebratory kind of, reflective time. It was a great, that was probably one of the happiest moments for me in working on that show, to have that moment, an opportunity to be given the ability to do the valedictorian speech. It really, I took it personally.
I want to ask you too, because Karen, it's beautiful. The words are just so beautiful. And for you, Gabrielle, when you read them and you know that Karen wrote them, I mean, do you feel the same way? Like, this is so beautiful what she has written here. Well,
Karen did a great job with that. She was, Karen writes with heart for sure. And so I'm just appreciative. It was just great to be able to, speak the words that she wrote, but it really is true. Karen, we've never talked about that, but you really do write with heart. And so it was really it was really a fun speech to be able to do and to share with everybody, because there were a lot of underlying messages in that moment.
And I'm going to let you go in a second. I want to ask you too, at this point in the show, you guys are going to be transitioning to college after this season. What was your feeling about that? Were you, I don't know, what did you feel like we're going to be okay? We're going to be the show. What were you thinking about how the show was going to do and move into it? Because you're talking about this being so impactful. You're all graduating together. This is a very special moment. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes and whatnot. And now we have this big thing going on too in the next season. Right. So what were you kind of feeling?
I think I was just living in gratitude. I love the idea that we were going to oh my God, we're graduating and continuing. We made it. Oh my God, we're not over yet. This is like every single year, it's like, this is the year. This is the year. And to think I was just a regular for the 5 years, just coming guesting after that. But every year for me was like, am I going to be able to pay my rent? Am I going to, is it going to keep going on? It's going to grow. And I think by that time I felt comfortable and confident with the show where it was at, but I did love the idea that it was going to continue on, and it allowed for different kinds of stories, right? Because now everybody's getting older, so it gave permission to maybe be a little bit more out there, and I like that. I love that as an idea. I mean, just it allowed for more room for more storytelling.
There had not been a successful college show before that. When I was in college, I proposed that as an idea. I thought, why isn't there a show about college? It's so much fun. And I was told that, it was 1970, in the 70s. They said, no, you can't. College is sex and drugs and rock and roll these days. You can't show that on TV. And,
Well, we certainly have blown through that, right?
Well, one of the things I always thought about that is that the high school experience, almost no matter where you went to high school, and there are things in here and had been through all the seasons that were things that Dan and I were familiar with while we were at Beverly Hills High School. But the high school experience is universal. College, did you go to a big state university? You were in the Ivy Leagues. It was a small little college. You had a community college. It isn't homogeneous. There's so many different. So you're not reaching in terms of how the network think was, find the largest audience. And colleges immediately it makes it more niche. Today it's all niche, so every show could be in college.
Well, the show, if it had started as a college show, might never have made it because the audience grew with us.
Absolutely.
Well, and I love your fans, exactly. Yep, totally.
But you remember, we kind of got boxed in. It was Mr. Spelling was really angry. Fox put out a college series. Peter Chernin bought one. I can't remember the name of it, but Leonard Goldberg produced it. It lasted one season. But because for what you say, there wasn't that history, and the history that we established and moved on. The other thing that I really loved, last thing I want to say about it to you, Gabrielle, is that when you're speaking about these friendships that will go on in real life, that's what you and the cast have.
Right.
You've had these friendships, these deep friendships, and that's very moving to someone like myself to know that you guys are still the team.
Yeah, we are. We love each other very much, and it's really interesting to see how everybody's lives have evolved. It really is, and it's so good to see you guys. I can't even tell you. I have to get ready for something I have to do. I didn't want to miss this moment to be able to say hello and to send good thoughts. And again, congratulations for the show.
Thank you.
And Dan, it's so beautiful to see you. It really is.
Congratulations on all your success, Gabrielle, and everything you're doing.
Thank you.
You're doing amazing.
Thank you,
And you're fighting the fight, and we appreciate you so much on so many levels. So thank you so much, Gabrielle, for being here, and we will see you again soon, I'm sure.
All right. Blessings, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
All right. It's always good seeing Gabrielle, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right, Chuck, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off there, but
worthwhile to do.
Yep. I think you were talking about an article that had come out is what you were talking about. I think that's where we were.
I'm sorry, Pete. I don't exactly. I was so overwhelmed by Gabrielle. I don't exactly remember where I was on that. But I do know that there was a lot of concern. We've talked about it. Mr. Spelling was very concerned about us moving away from high schools. That's why we had that PSA right as moment the show ended. And Fox was concerned that, and Spelling was concerned that we could not afford all these clips that we were using. And I can't, and as usual, even though it's not 32, I got the number wrong. I just checked 27 different clips. We came in under budget on what they had put as the clip and music budget by a few $1,000s. It was good, but they were really concerned it was not going to have any kind of internal thrust to it. It was just going to be, almost like This Is Your Life. And I think that Karen and I, with Dan, worked very hard weaving in the narrative. One of the things I love that you did, Dan, is that how on every, and I thought you got some really fine performances, as you always do with your actors, but to when you come out of a clip, you come in, it would be everybody had their own, here, do you remember this story? Do you remember this? Do you remember this? And you come out. And the one that particularly really moved me was, although I don't love the sequence of when Brandon's falling off the mountain, because it doesn't look that realistic to me. I wasn't there when they did it. I don't think you would have necessarily shot it that way, but nonetheless, that it's that levity of the senior breakfast, that look on Luke and Dylan remembering that moment, and when it comes out, you transition to that. and you know what he's thinking. And I think it's that you did that almost every one, that you'd come back to it. And I think that's what gave this episode so much depth, because it showed the specificity of these relationships.
And it was great how it was integrated to it. You got what their present day, how it was affected by that scene in the past. Exactly. You could see turning points and, in relationships that led to this moment kind of thing. Chuck really structured this episode, and we have to give him the credit for that, because he's the master of that, to try to have not only scenes between every pairing you could imagine in the show, but the different, you'd think Brandon, Brenda, you'd think maybe Dylan, Kelly, but you wouldn't maybe think Steve and, and someone else. And we have every single, way that it was, even in the very last scene, Steve is standard between Brenda and Brandon, which was really interesting. That was how they were seated at that point. And so it showed him enmeshed in there as well. And everyone is linked in, the parents, the moms, the dads, everybody came back, and it was just.
Well, I really appreciated what you guys did in terms of deepening the story by giving the story all those kind of associations. And it was great. And that's what you love as a director. You get something to really work with, meet to get to really dive deep into the characters and what's happening below the surface. And it was just really, really well conceived. And I also really appreciated, it intercut with really interesting stories present day. And the one that really surprised me how much I was moved by it was Brian's story. He was kind of, in many ways, kind of the ballast of the whole thing. Because he had an active conflict, concern. He was going to not graduate. And I was so moved, again, by that. That was one of my favorite episodes that I got to direct, was The Next 50 Years. But that scene in the broadcast booth, I was so glad that was reprised.
Yeah.
Brian acted so well throughout the whole thing, and then the flashbacks he acted so well too. So that was one thing that really jumped out.
Well, Karen, yesterday was Tori Spelling's birthday.
That's right.
So Karen wrote Tori a really nice note and said, we had just watched this, and see how far you came as an actress, even in those 3 seasons. Yeah. And I think the same can be said for Brian. I think that he still to this day will talk about how that episode changed him as an actor.
Wow. Yeah. It was kind of interesting too, how you saw it in the flashback you chose. I loved that scene on the mall outside or whatever, when his friend, I'm blanking on
Scott.
Yes. Cowboy hat on.
And it was so heartful the way Brian was able to portray, yes, he wanted to move on. Yes, he was happy he's one of the cool kids, but he also really felt bad to be leaving this kid behind. And he, it was just very, very touching. And that's kind of a transition, kind of Brian's own transition in his acting life. Right. Was kind of, mirrored.
So. And then following it up, I really like the fact that we were not lurid, and we played the shot in black. And it was like, well, if you knew the show, you knew someone had died, now you're going to understand it. You didn't need to see it. We didn't have to do
very true
exploitative moment there. And I think that and then the gunshot, by doing that, also then becomes really has a lot of power into it as well.
Yeah.
Chuck, a question for you. When you were structuring this, how did you pick the moments? Because there's so many great moments in the first few years of 90210. So getting them all in has to be a challenge. You're probably thinking of this, I want that. I'm sure you could come up with 40 of them. You know what I mean?
The one thing that I noticed from watching it last night is that the first ones we did in the first, I'd say the first third, the first half of the episode were more comedic. And then as it went on, the more dramatic scenes, the gunshot, Brenda and Dylan, he gets to me, always gets to me moment. Those were as the show evolve. So I think that was one of the things that guided me. And the other one was that, okay, every character needs to have that moment. I must ask you guys, because you, Dan and Pete, you've just watched it. Did we give one to Cindy? I know we gave it to James.
Well, you had Cindy in
them
naked bath and getting the phone call about Brian,
right. And that probably was hers, even though it felt like a little more Jim, because then we played the other scene with him and Brandon, the resolution of that.
Right.
That I will be your dad. You fucked up, but I love you. And
no, I think you gave her due. I think that was a very moving moment. And now that you mentioned Jim, I was so touched by him. I mean, it's like he's like, he's kind of the forgotten guy because it's about the kids and all that.
Yeah.
He brought so much heart to that. I mean, just in that moment, it's one that's coming to me is when, like he's telling Brenda, "You'll always be my little girl," and in ways that got past the cliche of it all, and you just really felt the truth of that for him. It was great. Yeah.
Chuck, you mentioned that you'd have to pay for these clips. I think fans might be confused by that because they would assume that you own the clips because of the show should own the clips of the show. So why would you? Yeah.
Because it's reuse. So there's certain people you have to pay. You have to pay all the actors, the writer, and the director. Composers are not happy. I think maybe now, do composers get paid now, Dan? I don't think they were paid then.
I don't know.
Probably not because they're composers.
I just learned, Chuck was reminding me that 2 points I have to make. One is that when I think her name's Gabrielle Carteris, is that the ice skater, was a feature actress. She had done that beautiful movie with
Pacino. Scent of a Woman.
But I don't know if it had come out yet or it wasn't. She wasn't a big movie star at the time. She taped 90210 that she filmed that, but by the time of this graduation episode, it had come out, and she had to give her consent because she wasn't a regular on the show. So that's interesting. The guest cast had to give their consent for the reuse in a different program in a different episode, but she did, luckily. And that the other point about that is that another great structuring thing of Charles, when you're saying, Peter, how did we fit everything in? So for Brandon, we just did a quick montage for him doing with the Dobie Gillis thing, which really dates us because we watched Dobie Gillis. Little, very tiny kids. But showing him with each different girl that he had to, a makeout scene with, basically. And if you knew the scenes, you knew them. If you didn't, you didn't. But it was a way to, instead of showing a whole scene, it was just basically the kissing, for a couple seconds, and then you go to the next one. And that's one way we got a lot of stuff in, little tricks like that, too, to summon up the memories for the people that knew.
On that note about Brandon's montage, and he says, or Dylan asks him which of the girls meant the most to him, and he does say the skater. But I would have thought now, knowing where it was with Emily, that he would have said Emily. Was that? I mean, why did you choose the skater versus Emily? Because Emily would come back the next year. He goes and visits her and all that stuff, and there is this sort of like thing with Brandon and Emily.
Right. Well, that redeveloped.
Sure.
When they saw each other, the bond happened post high school as well. Sure. If he had run into, he was thinking from that point, and at that point, Emily was, someone he loved but was wacky, and it had.
Ice skating. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're also able to get that lyrical ice skating sequence in.
Well, that's what I wanted. I was going to say the romance of it was.
That was Paul Wagner's favorite episode but they, she was like a fantasy dream, like beautiful, princess that he couldn't really get into her world. So you always kind of remember those things with longing because you don't, you always want what you cannot have, kind of thing.
Yes.
And you imagine what could be, kind of. So maybe that was, I don't know. This is post-writing rationalization, but
sure. I'm curious for you, Dan, when you get the script and you see all these clips, and what is that at first? Are you overwhelmed by that? You know what I mean? Like, oh, what are we?
Well, it's a real challenge. I mean, I was happy that it worked as well as you did. And I appreciate what you said about getting in and out of them, because that was the real challenge. I mean, how do you keep the narrative thrust going, the storytelling going forward, and actually use it to advantage, which I think we wound up doing by making it a deepening of each character moment as a rise. I remember that time. It wasn't, that was kind of fun at the Peach, but I think the first
that was how it started. Right?
Yeah.
But then it's true. I mean, it was structured well so that you're going to get deeper and deeper. So, I did have to kind of develop a language that people would understand that would be consistent throughout. And we used, it's a traditional one, but, kind of a push in. But then I definitely wanted that, and I appreciate you acknowledging it. I wanted something coming out of it. So we didn't just, we had that experience.
Right.
I think I almost every time, if not every time, pull back. So it's like we go in and then we come out and we leave the character somewhat changed. And that was just, a directorial challenge. You have to, you got to keep the story going instead of just throwing a lot of stuff at the audience.
Mm-hmm. And it's a big moment, because we talked about it with Gabrielle. This is a big moment for the show. We're going to be moving the kids out of high school and transitioning them to college. It's a big moment, like I talked about, watching it in New Jersey, feeling like they're connected to me and all this, and they're going through the same experience I'm going through as I'm graduating. Is any of that weighing on you as you're directing this episode, or are you just kind of in the moment?
You know what I so appreciated watching it? I mean, when was this, like 28 years ago or something like that? This was filmed
1993. Yeah.
And I really developed, I went to film school, but really my film school was 90210 because I got to direct so much.
The practical. It was graduate school, Dan.
Such a great line.
I was really moved by the fact that, it's like I watched it. It's like, I don't know what I'd do terribly differently now. I mean, it's like, those are all, it's like, and to your point, to your question, one of the things I really enjoyed was how much I think we all captured the feeling of graduation and all that kind of, I guess what you refer to as B-roll. It's like, the kind of the candid shots and just the excitement and a lot of foreground stuff happening all the time and setting up the chair. And it's like, we all, most of us have had a high school experience like that. And I really loved that we could kind of call on those memories to really, what were the images? What did it feel like? And I really am happy that it really got translated into the shooting of it, because it's like, so much was contextualizing it. And, I got to just mention, since we're talking about that, there was a very odd thing that happened on that prep, because it's like I always, go.
Are you going back to Torrance High School?
Yeah.
Go for it. One of us had to bring it up.
Yeah. The way I developed to work was, it's like I really would have, and Chuck mentioned it in another one of our podcasts, is I like to spend a lot of time just alone on the sets and kind of thinking of it. So I would prep, and I went down one Sunday just to Torrance High. I just wanted to see the space, and it was because the stands had been put up and nobody was there. And that's when the images tend to come to me much better when I can just kind of be there and kind of dream the show and watch what wants to happen. So I got there, I think at 10 in the morning or something on a Sunday. Nobody was there. And I'm just walking around getting up in the stands, looking where would the angle be, where would Gabrielle be, and I see below the stands this, I don't even know why I went behind the stands, but I went behind the stands and I see on the ground this odd little box. And I look at it and I see wires coming out of it.
Oh, geez.
And now I start to think, holy moly, here's this, the most popular show with all of these stars about to sit in these stands, and right below it looked like something that could be a bomb. And I don't know who I called first, but somehow the police.
Probably you called me or probably Paul.
Yeah, but the whole.
I'd love to know your reaction to that call, Chuck.
Yeah, the whole bomb squad came down and they looked at it, and I'm pretty sure I'm certain it turned out not to be a real bomb, but it certainly turned out to be something that someone wanted to look like a real bomb. So it was a very, which also, just let me finish, which also affected, me on the day. It's like, we had a lot of special security and everything like that. But anyway, we're going to say
there were men with guns on the roof.
Yeah.
Snipers.
In the, all around. Who stepped into this? I think, Paul and I, we talked about it immediately. What are we going to do? What do we need? It was, it had the materials inside, nails and things like that. It just, fortunately, whoever put it together wasn't a profession, didn't work for Hamas. I mean, it was someone who didn't know much about bombs and this, but it did have, some things that had it been a bomb, and these things that would have thrown out and gone into active space, it would have been a horror show. So Paul and I just, we talked about what we would need to do, and tried to keep everything calm. And I remember that the next day, that Monday, Duke Vitzen rolls up, and this is Duke's moment, security, the manpower, where's the SWAT team? And it was I always remember chuckle at
a lot of adrenaline.
And I don't think we told the cast. I think we kept it from everybody. It was a very small number of people who knew this.
Our relatives that we put in as extras either. I don't think we told them. We were spotting our sisters and nephew in the background. They're behind.
We positioned our nephew
so well.
Right behind Kelly Taylor, and my sister Carol was sitting right behind Jackie Taylor. So when you in the opening, so you would actually see their smiling faces when they were much younger, and
Andrea was right behind David as character. It was
also one of my favorite things, and this is we didn't keep using real people's names, but I think Dan would appreciate that the first name called was Gary Ashertel, who was a classmate of ours and still a friend. I almost can call him the legendary Gary Ashertel, actually, but. Yeah, I like that. Got to hear his name.
So, Dan, you're working with this information about the bomb, and thank God that you went to do that. I mean, that must have been pretty intense for you while you're shooting that, because it's enough dealing with the bombs that might be going on set, but now you've got this other thing on the back of your head too. So, how are you balancing all this?
Yeah, it was amazing. I'm pretty sure it was a Sunday, right, Chuck? So it was like the next, and I think it was maybe the next day we were going to shoot, right? Or the next 2 days after that? Or was it like?
I don't think it was the next day, because I do remember us reconnoitering.
Of course it was nerve-wracking, but, it was such a challenging episode, because, 90210 shot, I think the regular schedule was like 7 days or something. I mean, I'm sure we got a little more time, but it's like, that was a huge sequence. I forget how long it took to shoot it, maybe 2 days. I'm sure it was at least 2 or 3 days for the rehearsal and then the final event and all that, but it wasn't luxurious. And, so I had my hands full, just kind of, okay, we got to get this and got to move on to that and get, so it was, I had to have my kind of, game face on the whole time. So, but in the back of my head, of course, was this thing. I did feel confident by the security measures that were taken. I think by the time I got there, I think we're going to be fine.
But, and Duke Vincent would have personally handled it if he needed to take someone down. Right.
Remember, it was 1993, not the 21st century.
Yeah,
right.
It was a different feeling in that point. I agree with Dan. We solved it. We're moving on, and this is just precautionary. That it wasn't an imminent threat.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Imminent threat, I should say.
This stuff with Brandon and Andrea writing feels like, or him helping her with the speech feels like Charles and Karen maybe a little bit helping each other with the speech. Does it? Yes,
it does to me. It did to me. The unfathomable paths. I remember writing it there. The convoluted language, etc. Although Chuck does tend to be a little more long-winded in his prose than I am. He does use very long sentences, and that she was kind of emulating the most the least easy speak. You know, it was just complicated what she was doing. She just wasn't in touch with.
Yeah, I have an affinity for semicolons and dashes. I do.
Can I take this moment to make a shameless plug, because it's kind of you just provided me a segue to it, but I've just written a book actually on direct. Yeah,
great, Dan.
It's going to be released in September. You can look up. It's called Directing Great Television: Inside TV's New Golden Age. It's going to be released in September. It's on Amazon now. But the reason that you brought it to mind is like, I am like Chuck in this relationship, and my wife is an editor, and she played like you. And I would write drafts that were so convoluted and qualifying and this and that, and she had to keep knocking me down. And take this out, take this out. So anyway, I got in a plug, but I'm also,
love it.
I can't wait to see it. The show was just on some list of the 25 best teen shows of all time, and we were like, I think we were number 4.
Number 4. Yep.
Some people
I argued that it should be number 1, but
and then I reminded Pete that he doesn't really know Friday Night Lights.
Yeah, true.
And I used to say, in all humble, that when the first episodes I watched of Buffy, I went shit, because it was everything we did catching high school, and then putting it into the supernatural. And I think truthfully, we are 90210 was very lucky, in my own opinion, that Amy Heckerling had problems getting Clueless made, Fast Times made, because that could have been their Clueless. Some of her movies were really also catches it, and if she had gotten that made when that was about Beverly Hills, and then so the series never lived up to the movie, but it was a great hats off to her. She did 2 great depictions of high school, both in the 80s and the 90s.
Speaking of supernatural things, we do this thing where Dylan is seeing Jack in person, and I love this as opposed to seeing the bomb and all that again. You played it a little bit differently this time. Talk to me about Dylan writing and Dylan seeing his dad at graduation. Well,
I love the expression on his face that Dan captured of Luke's face. He looked like a little boy. See that little right eye? He looked like a little boy looking at his dad, like he's not the cool man Luke. He's, and I love that. That was the performance aspect of that. I do not remember. I thought it was a great idea, but I love that he just appeared and there's no smoke and there's no,
exactly,
no sparklies or anything, but
he's a part of the thing. Like he could be anybody that walked up to him. It could, you know what I mean? And it happens to be his father. Do you remember writing that and putting that together?
Charles. Sure. Well, it followed through the fact that we had seen him before in season, in one of the earlier episodes. I think it was Child is the Father to the Man, actually, we talked about that he shows up there, and then we used it later in season 5. And it's, you like to think, especially as we age, that the people we love and remember are around us in some ways. Whether they contextualize and we see them is different, but it's a TV show, so we can see them.
But it's a great flashback to something that we all know happened without using another clip. You know what I mean? You used the storytelling in a different way, but still.
Oh yeah,
those memes. Now, they say, "Tell me that your father died," without telling me that your father died.
Yes,
and it was kind of nice too that you have the new age mother who kind of supports the idea that who knows what might happen.
That's right.
And didn't she look marvelous? And didn't all the women look marvelous? Honestly, I don't know. They all look. Denise Dowes, Mrs. Teasley, everybody, Jackie, everyone looked so good in this episode. It was really the cast. Everyone was wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you about bringing back. You brought everybody. You pretty much brought everybody back that you could for this.
But one.
Yeah. David's
no Felice Martin in this one.
No Felice? And David's father wasn't there, was he, either?
And that's because she just had the whole debacle with
and Mel Silver wasn't. We didn't see Mel.
Silver.
You know, we do have, as Dan will tell you, he's just been there in the front lines. There is something called a budget, and you can't bring you can't please everybody. So we didn't include them. And notice that we didn't have anything from and made no reference to Donna Martin Graduates. We had already done that, and we couldn't use any clips from those episodes because when we were in prep with this one, they were shooting that one. That was the one that preceded this. So how could we use any of the footage? It didn't make any sense. We couldn't. So,
and it was just so recent too. Like it's like
that's right. That's right.
Yeah, and she does say something to Donna. Does say something to Kelly as someone who almost didn't graduate. I'm happy to be here. Or something. She does reference what had just happened. So it's not like it's ignored completely.
Well, one of the things that I realized especially as we became more serialized, which really happened in season 3 and then moved on, is that you had to, and I don't know if people do this today, Dan. I don't necessarily think they do because they're streaming. It's so easy to get to previous episodes, but that I had to write the episodes for amazing fans who knew everything, like Pete. And then people who don't know the show so well, like Molly the dog, my son's dog. And you had to do both. So, there were those moments, and I'm thinking particularly, that one that I really liked with Brandon almost, thinking that she's going to change, not go to Yale because of him. And we did that kind of subtly so that he didn't become obnoxious in it, but at the same time, it got to be aired in, their relationship. I also, looking back, small little moment, but it stands out as I'm thinking here, is that we learn, of course, we made it that Steve put the Hartley house as his return address. So someone would know most likely that he was the one who gave the check.
I love that.
So that there was still a little bit of larceny in everything he does, which I can relate to, being a North of Sunset homeboy myself.
Yeah, I thought that was great. I also, now that you mentioned Gabrielle, I'm sorry she's not here for me to tell her directly, but I thought that was a hilarious cut when they're in the kitchen and he says, "Yeah, what lame person would change what college they went to because of someone who might be going to another school?" And then with that goofy grin of hers, it was very funny.
The other thing that you guys are trying to, talk about is this relationship and the triangle and all that stuff that's going on. So talk to me about, this is the end of high school, right? So these relationships are going to be shifting and changing, but it's important to acknowledge, and they always feel really great together, Brenda and Dylan. There's always a lot of unsaid stuff and said stuff, and there's so much chemistry going on there. Talk to me about writing that out and not knowing, maybe where that's going to go, but I think that's really great the way you left it.
Well, I think that we, every time, in the language here of that Iris McKay was like her son's cock blocker. That every time there he was with Kelly, and there he was with Brenda. And with Brenda, I think you look what's going there. They, and Luke being a Lothario, a good word. He was ready to. I think he was ready to kiss her. I mean, that's the vibe I got. They were gonna do something. Where it went, what it would mean, who knows. But I do. I think the indecision on our part had to do with when Brenda says, "I'm going to University of Minnesota." Mm-hmm. We had no idea what that would mean. That was something that we better figure out how we're going to work with that. Originally I pitched to Spelling that we should keep Brian and David Silver in high school. Keep 90210 going and make this a college spinoff. Everybody had to be together. That was very important to him. And so Yale could not be either. Unless we didn't want, unless he would pay off Gabrielle for the next 2 seasons, because in terms of the contract, or that would not pick her up, which was ridiculous because she was so popular and he knew that, because we wanted to send her to Yale too at a certain point. But
Yeah, and you're not going to build Yale just for one character and have her things happening in her life. So she has to go to California University.
Right.
But Brenda does go to Minnesota, and that must have been a tough thing to. There's a lot of things that we could talk about, and we don't have to get into the whole thing. But I mean, that was also sort of circulating at the time as well. What are we going to do with Brenda? Right.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was.
That's a great.
Leave it at that.
I forgot about that.
Leave it at that. Huh?
Yeah. Well, Chuck came home. I remember him saying, "So we're going to do." It was earlier where we were playing the arcs and so forth that he was saying, well, we have to, Mr. Spelling wants them all to be together. So we're sitting there going, wait, so David is how much younger than that? What grade is he actually playing? Because, they were in 11th grade for 2 years. And then so we weren't sure. And it's like, isn't that kind of unrealistic that all the best friends end up going to this? Now, I did go to UCLA, and I had a group of friends from Foothill High in Orange County that all came together, but they weren't all the best friend clique that came.
Sure.
Just they all knew each other, but it just we were faced with a situation that is improbable, let me say, and tried to make it as believable as possible. So that was a reason to.
Let me just jump in because. You remind me of something I'd completely forgotten about, which is, the issues around Shannon and all the questions and all that and everything. And I think the reason I forgot about it is I just fell in love with her watching this episode and all the flashbacks. I mean, she was magical. I mean, you just go right into her soul. It's beautiful. I mean, she really has something.
And she's an incredible performer, and it actually works so well that her character would be the one that went to Minnesota or someplace else. So it's maybe it's a happy accident or whatever, however you want to frame it, but it does work really well, and she does deliver that difficult decision. Am I going to stay with my friends or am I going to go back home? You know what I mean? And she learns a great lesson in that, I think. And a lot of people identify with that particular storyline as they were going through some of those similar decisions back then.
I loved seeing the Isn't It Romantic episode, the scene, the sort of dramatic scene with Dylan. He throws the pot and their first kiss, which was my first episode that I wrote. And I was there when they filmed that. It was very nostalgic for me to see that again in this context and how great that was. But then also to have a clip that Dan directed, the episode where the clip was taken from, like the French one when they were eating the brains and so forth, which I remember Dan did not like that scene before he shot it. He thought it was. I remember him saying in the concept, what was it called, the tone meeting? He said, "Well, we've kind of seen this before." And Chuck was like, he said, "When have you seen this before?"
Well, I'll tell you when you could have seen it before, Dan. If you would have been at our table in Paris when that happened, and guess what? Then it happened the next night too. We ordered something with a different name, and brains came out.
Good job.
The one thing I want to go back to one thing Karen said though about the reality of kids going to the same college.
Yeah.
Back when we were students, and and it was a long time ago when the University of California still has incredibly high standards, but it was open to California kids who were inclined to be academic, went to UCLA, Berkeley. There wasn't all the spinner schools. I mean, Santa Cruz was new, new. So, kids in California, the very few went. I mean, Dan Attias could have gone to any school he wanted to go to, and you went to Berkeley, right, Dan? I mean, your first school, yeah. So it was such a good bargain. It was where you wanted to go, and thinking about it, kids. I remember one of our mutual friends, Fred Byrne, went to Penn, and I thought, and Mike Chernoff went to Penn, and now my kids went to Penn. It opened up and great, but why would anybody want to be anywhere else but UCLA or Berkeley? So that was, even though that may not have been true in the 90s, that was a governing spirit that let me rationalize that they'd all end up at the same college.
Got it. I want to ask Dan about some of these scenes where we see the group together. I mean, this is some epic, incredible stuff.
Yeah.
lives with all of us. Do you
Yeah.
remember sort of? Oh, and I want to talk about that too in a second. But do you remember sort of putting some of this together and
Sure.
Yeah.
I do. I remember that we shot it all in one day. It was a very ambitious day. So we had to shoot the opening to the episode, and it was incredibly windy. So you can still see it. It's just still hear it a little bit, but that was a challenge. And I was impressed too that, I just came off the show Billions, where, the demand is you get close-ups of everybody and all this. And now we didn't have close-ups, and how nice that was. Just the kind of, the group shots and the sense of, but part of that was also the need of, having to have a really, really challenging day, because we had to do that opening. And then before we ended with the night stuff. So we had to do the departure as the sun was setting, which played as sunset, when they all get in their cars. And I really remember, I want to just do a little acknowledgement of Rick Gunter, who sadly passed away, had a terrible illness, but he was very helpful that day. And coming up with, seeing the sun in the shot as they're departing to play like dawn. We had to get all that. I don't recall when we shot the trek down the mountain. That may have been the same day too. And then we ended by doing the night scene, which was their own meeting. And it was just, as the director, I'm not really, the cast loved it because they were playing all their, they were and that was what you want them to do. You want them to love it because that was the feeling. They wanted them to be in that. I personally am generally trying to create the environment where they're feeling permission to do that, while I'm anxious to have time. We got to go. The sun's setting. We got to get back up the hill to do that. It's all that stuff.
Yes, exactly. I bet you did it all in one day. I'm sure you did it in a one day.
Yeah, I'm sure we did it back in those days.
Because of this man, Rick Gunther, and the fact that at this point we were really a well-oiled machine, and Dan knew exactly what he was doing, and there was a lot riding on it. That we would shoot 8 pages a day sometimes, 7.5 all
most times.
Yeah, other shows are happy sometimes if they get 4 pages done.
Yeah,
we really were. Yeah, in many times, Dan, especially in seasons 4 and 5. Yeah, we would finish episodes in 6.5 days. We'd start shooting the next episode as we're wrapping the last shot of the other, because we could do it so quickly and get ahead of ourselves.
Not only that, you'd get into that situation which has now been double ups, where you'd be shooting simultaneously 2 units, and the cast having to kind of hold in mind, what story they're in now, because they started the morning in one episode and they're going to the other.
Did you shoot a double up?
I think I did. I think it was maybe those Occidental shows. Maybe it was those days. I'm not sure which, but I'm pretty sure I did. Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah.
What I want to ask you, Dan, you mentioned before, for young directors listening to this, you mentioned before that 90210 is like your film school. What is something maybe that you picked up while doing 90210 that you didn't learn in going to film school? Is there something that
Well, there's a million things you pick up that you don't learn in going to film school. In fact, I started mentoring some young directors several years back, which actually led to me kind of deconstructing my process to describe it, which actually led to me wanting to write a book. Where you don't, it's like there's so many things that you don't. It's like just the need to be so prepared to know what every character's motivation is, to have a staging in mind, which hopefully you don't impose. The actors find it, but you have to kind of nurture them to find it. And then you can be open to, only by being prepared can you then be open to their ideas, to then you can adjust because you know what the significant moments are. I think in 90210, that was really interesting. I was a lot more, I would say almost rigid in because I didn't have that much experience. And sometimes with Luke and with Jason and with Steve, Ian, it's like they were so free form that I loved that energy. But I'd say in the beginning of it, I was more concerned, okay, but I need you to be here and I need you to, and they, love to find it more. I remember one time they were actually calming me. Dan, don't worry, it's going to be okay. We can do this. that was something I learned. Yeah, okay, I can trust in the process a little.
There was a great shot in the basketball when they're playing horse in the end.
Yeah, I was looking at that, thinking I was trying to remember. I wonder how many takes it took for Jason to make a shot. Probably not many. They're both good.
Yeah, they were athletic.
Yeah.
There's definitely some little ad-libbing going on. Yeah.
Well, following up on what Dan said about the looseness sometimes that the guys could bring that the gals didn't, was, we would not only in this episode but almost in every 902 episode that we've watched in this year of our podcast, that the writers have to scratch their heads and say, did we write that, or was that Ian? And, mostly it's Ian, who was
Jason, right?
Really ad-libber, and he and Jay. Luke, God bless him, would try to ad-lib like them, and not quite. But those two guys were really, really adept.
And I mentioned something that wasn't an ad-lib, but I was just thinking the one time I really noticed the different era that was filmed in and what the era is now is early on in the first episode when Ian says, I'm going to graduate. And he goes down the hallway and he just comes up to a girl and kisses her and walks away. Everyone, that's in high school. Boy, have times changed.
To be able to do that.
Oh yeah. And I didn't go to a big high school like you're saying that's sort of universal. I went to a very tiny private prep school in New York City, and there were very few people at my graduating class. But that spirit, that energy that he did with that kiss, and all of his excitement, we're graduating, all that kind of pent up. That is the universal thing. It's not so much the actual rituals, but some we do really like it, but the feeling, that exuberance, that.
Well, when we were watching it yesterday, and the song came up, "School's Out for Summer," you said, "Oh, that's my song. That was our song."
It was came out like the year before I graduated. Yeah, exactly.
I want to ask you too, Charles, about this changing the sign and all of this. Right? We need to talk about this.
Yes.
Well, that's a visual effect. We didn't really change.
Right. But
was that based on an actual senior prank at your high school, Charles, or was there one?
No. There had been. That? Well, the thing about the Hollywood sign, it was originally Hollywood Land, and the land fell off, and there was the Hollywood sign, and it was kind of disgraceful. But for years, and I can't tell you even what decades, it was in complete disrepair. And you'd still see the letters up there, but they'd be falling down. And at one point, I believe the person who finally paid to get them restored was Hugh Hefner. But people did go up there, and I think that like an SC fraternity, I think once did beat UCLA or something like that. And there was one hippie one, Stop the War or whatever it would be. But it was pretty much left alone. It wasn't it wasn't central to the imagery of Los Angeles at the time. And then, of course, it has become that. What Pete I think is referring to is that we begged, Dan, I don't know if you remember this. You probably weren't. This was a post-production thing a little bit more. We begged Mr. Spelling to let the West Beverly High morph in to 90210 and morph out. Just that we wanted that to happen, and he would not break the fourth wall. And I think I wanted a day if we would be together, if he wouldn't be so rigid and realize it would be okay, but couldn't convince him. So
you said this is from 93. How difficult, Dan, is it to achieve, or for both of you, to achieve this kind of visual effect back in 93? I'm sure today would be.
Well, Chuck would know better. Chuck and Karen would know better how it was handled in post, because I just assumed.
We had our our post department, Dave Semmel and Ken Miller, and they just did it. I mean,
I gotta say, you make a good point, because I don't recall if there were many visual effects throughout 90210. You guys could comment on that, but boy, the world has changed. It's just now to the point where the one thing I regret about it is you become inured to, you're not impressed by things happening. When you knew things like the chase and what was it, the French Connection, that real car chase going through all this stuff. It's like, well, now, okay, was that real? Was that not? It's like when you see something that it was real, it's something. Anyway, that's not exactly answering your question, but
it's a very interesting point. And I think about we did a couple of episodes in San Francisco, Dan, with following up with Emily Valentine and Brandon in season 4. And all I remember saying to the directors is just make it clear that we were here, that this was a real cable car, that this was real, that we did. And anytime we went anywhere, it was Cabo or Palm Springs, that we were there. And as Dan says, now that's meaningless. I remember, did you ever shoot American Dreams?
Yeah, a couple of them.
So Dave Semmel has told me that when they did all of those scenes, there was a subplot. One of their characters went to Vietnam, and they recreated Saigon, and it was all CGI. It was they didn't recreate Saigon, and I went, oh my God, the business is really. I'm already obsolete.
Our one episode with a lot of effects is that Christmas one with it's a very happening life. It sort of did
School bus.
And the dreams of Dylan McKay too.
Stars talking. It's very primitive. It's really primitive now looking back, but that's us. Yeah, it was.
And even then, I knew it was primitive, but I realized it would be fun to have it be so primitive. It was worthwhile doing.
Also, just a word on the changing technology, just because it is such a long span that we're looking back. And in the pilot, they had somebody with a car phone. There was a car phone, and that was all you had. And then in this episode, now it's 3 years later, they're talking about Dylan's getting a cellular phone, because he has the money, and one day there'll be a video phone. Oh my goodness, and and even Brenda's getting accepted to college was a thick envelope,
Right. Yes. Yeah.
That exists anymore. You just turn on your computer and So all those little things, those antiquated now things are very interesting to me. That and it would have changed, having cell phones and having all the technology would have changed a lot of plot points. I mean,
and I've been told by our younger fans that's an appeal of the show, to see what life in the 90s was like, all the things that you had to go through to be there. It's
someone, you don't have your phone to check how far away are you now,
or you actually had to watch the night it aired, or you missed it.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. That's the biggest. That's really the biggest one.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think it would be hard, Dan, and I guess all shows are the same, and you do the top of the line shows, but the idea that when you had to be on the night, had to watch it the night it aired, there was a thing of not only an opening, but there was an importance to it, that we're on right now, and this is what matters. And I think of all the shows you had, I don't think we missed The Sopranos once on a Sunday night. We watched that show, and it was this. And that's why I think some of these streaming services still do them one at a time, and they don't let them all come out all at once.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's like they used to call them water cooler shows. It's like that next day at work, everyone would gather around the water. Did you see what happened at so and so?
Yes.
Yeah.
I miss that. I think we all miss it. It's just like now. Yeah, I mean, it's. I feel that way. There's so many great shows on that I don't even know about. Someone's you got to watch that, and it's like, it's just we've lost something at the same time we've gotten something.
We've got a lot more content to choose from, but not the communal experience of seeing it at the same time. Although they do that, they tweet along and stuff like that. Sure. But also, this past year there wouldn't have been anybody at the water cooler anyway.
That's fair enough. I want to ask you before we wrap this iconic shot. This becomes pretty popular. I mean, in the history of 90210. Do you remember this and putting that together? It's such an awesome shot.
Yeah, it was just a big crane. We pulled back, and I gotta say, I mean, like I said earlier, it's like even though that was there's more towards the start of my career, I really felt like. Yeah, I don't know if I'd do any differently. That was really a nice shot. How people would, what I noticed in that shot was how everybody joined. I think it was all in one, where you first saw Luke getting out of his car and coming up, and the others. And I think you saw the cars, whatever, but everybody kind of had pulled in time enough to fill in the frame in time enough in real time. And then I may be mistaken about that, but I think so. And then the pullback. And then wanting to be high up to be like kind of as if from the signs point of view, what they were looking at. So they could all look back at the frame. I don't know how many takes we did. I was really appreciating the energy everybody brought. And I think Ian was the first one who did a kind of hands up, and Luke kind of mimicked him. And
yes.
We just play it together. It was like they were one organism. It was really kind of fun. Really wonderful. Yeah.
Definitely.
Pete uses the word iconic a lot. I think Melanie would agree with me. But that image is the iconic shot of our series. That's the one they use to promote it. It remains fixed in fans' minds. So.
For sure. And for you, for Charles and Karen, at this point, the season's wrapping, right? Where are you guys what are you thinking about next season and all that stuff? Are you in your mind like this is, I mean, obviously the show is great. It's a huge moment, but there is college that's looming and you don't know what's really going to come from that. So what is your thoughts as you see this season back then?
Well, you'd be surprised. You know, my part of my job was to be ahead of the curve. Right. So I actually saw and have in my files here the letter that I wrote to Spelling and John Littman at Fox about this is where we're going to be going in the 4th season. This is what we're going to be doing. This is what we're going to be looking at. Fraternity, sorority, this, college issues, franchise, whatever it was about and how we were going to shift to Occidental College, just different things like that we had to prepare for. But I know for Karen and I on a personal level, what it meant was there were no summer episodes and we could actually have a summer. And and we, in our circle, people would go away on trips with their children in summers. In television, especially when you're running a show, you can't do that because you're starting to film or prep, and the writers are there, the show gets in spring. You can't. People who take vacations in show business, usually it was in late spring. And I remember Karen and I in this episode, we had won in an auction a trip to Jamaica, and we went down to Jamaica and kind of, recharged to come back and write this episode, actually. And but in that we got a beach house for the whole summer, and it was really a wonderful. It's the summer of our lives. It was a beautiful house in Malibu, and we just got to recharge. And we'd have and the writers would come out. And we'd have story meetings there, and I didn't know Larry then. And the moment I saw him catch a wave, I said, "Oh, this guy and I are going to be friends." And we had it was a really good time. It was a high time for us as the end of the 3rd season. Yeah, really good stuff. Dan, thank you for being with us. I'm such a fan of your work and whatnot, and I love talking. And I can't wait for your book to come out.
Wait for the book.
Autographed copies, please.
Yes.
And it's just absolutely awesome. Chuck, I think we're going to attempt to cover Unreal World next week. We'll see. So that's where we'll be. But I want to let the fans know that we are pre-recording more episodes as opposed to doing them live. I know everybody's kind of getting back to some sort of version of normalcy, and so we're sort of trying to do the same thing and fit what everybody's scheduled. But the show must go on might be just a little bit different how we present it. All right, guys, this was great, really good episode, and we will see you all next week. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.